There's far too much hurt, far too many broken relationships.
Far too much anger, far too much hatred.
Let's take hate out. Let's take hate out of the conversation.
Let's take hate out of the conversation. Don't stop the conversation.
But have it without the hate. Conversations can be hard, difficult, and even uncomfortable.
But to build a better future, we need to have them.
Let's work together.
Let's work together to take hate out of the conversation.
Hey, welcome to the Peanut Gallery. Thanks for joining us. We are continuing in our series of taking hate out of the conversation. And today I'd like to welcome Afeez back to the podcast. Hey, welcome back, Afeez.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad to be back here.
We're excited to have you back.
Thank you.
Fresh off the campaign trail.
Absolutely, right. I was grueling,
Yeah,
right?
I bet it was
But
grueling.
I did enjoy every bit of the campaign, right?
Yeah.
Not just in meeting people at the doors and listening to, their stories and what they genuinely, looked for in representation and in the politicians, focusing on, that affects day-to-day life. But I think also in getting to know the other contestants. And sometimes I look back and I wonder whether we could detach, what we represented at that point, whether it was between myself and, Karen, whether with Amanda, or whether with Chelsea, just detaching all those policies and positions that were represented going into the campaigns and even just becoming friends, just friends, with them and, irrespective of what we stood for, at the election. So for me, I think just looking back and being able to connect, somehow with all the other contestants, I think was a win for me.
So what do you think? Like the campaign lasted, it was about 3 months, something like that.
It was less than that for us.
Right? Yeah, right. Because you had to jump in. You jumped in late into the riding,
right to the end, right?
But you were like pedal to the metal, right to the floor, go. Like you were putting signs in lawns and all sorts of. And you were going. The difference in your understanding of the people in this region. How much did it change from in those 2 months? Do you think?
So I think you go in with some preconceived notion of what this area looks like. You hear stories of, this has been represented by X for 16 years.
Conservative is what he's saying.
X. 16 years, right?
Stop it, people.
It's impossible to, turn it or become liberal or that. You hear that. But at the end of the day, Canadians are Canadians, right?
Yep.
Irrespective of our political leaning, right? But at the end of the day, we also got over 12,000 votes. So that tells me that our messages resonated with a few people, that we were able to appeal, as a person, as a candidate, personally, I think we did appeal to a broad set of people. And I think also messaging, the platform that we also campaigned with, the Liberal platform, I think also resonated with it. But at the end of the day, we didn't win. But I think we won the hearts of people, and
well, you definitely won our hearts when you came in here and you shared your story on our podcast. And
Thank you.
And just as we've discussed before, the quality not only of your interview but of your openness and your willingness to share. We really appreciated that, and we really think it spoke to the quality of people that your political party was looking to have as part of who would be representing Canadians. So I want to say thank you for putting your name in the arena and being willing to put yourself out there. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to take all the shots that come with it.
Absolutely.
It's not an easy thing to do to invest that time away from family. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for coming back. And we in our series, I want to kind of come back in the original podcast. You shared a little bit about life growing up in Nigeria. And I really want to kind of start there and kind of follow your journey. You have a very unique story. I mean, at least for me, like I grew up pretty much like 15 kilometers away from here.
Yeah.
I'm still here. It's not like I've been on the same type of journey that your life has taken you on. So you have perspectives from a multitude of cultural backgrounds. You have perspectives from a multitude of continental backgrounds.
Yeah.
Whether it's your workplace or your educational experience, and then even your family.
Right.
So it's you have a lot of experience and a lot of different perspectives that I think really will add to this conversation. And based on that first podcast, we're like, we gotta have Afeez back because there's more to share there. Yeah. So starting out with life in Nigeria, can you share a little bit like what was life like growing up in Nigeria, and what were the expectations that were put on you as a young man?
Yeah, well, as with every or any other developing country or economy, will come with its own unique opportunities or challenges, as one would say, of lack of infrastructure. You might have struggles with electricity, struggle with roads, or the things that we take for granted, right, in the West, like internet or water, all those other basics, right? So that obviously will shape to an extent what you do every day, right? How you get up in the morning, what time you get up in the morning, and the things you do, throughout the day. But you also had the layer on of, things like education. I was fortunate to have, grown up at a point when education was free, largely free, and was quite good. In the western part of Nigeria, we had very good, high-quality education. So I was fortunate to have, in that generation, to have passed through all that. So clearly, you were expected to go to school. Right?
Okay, so you were born into a family of farmers.
Yeah.
How many siblings again did you have? How many brothers and sisters?
I had 6, right?
Okay, so you had 6.
Yeah.
So your dad, he was like, okay, I'm sending you to school. Okay, so life on the farm. Was there expectations that you were going to be out in the fields, work in the fields with him, or was he like, I want you to go to school, I want you to get your education? Like, did your dad have like a big dream for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the expectation, right, locally or usually was that everyone would go to school, but that will also help. So whatever your dad, was doing, if he was a blacksmith, you come back from school, you go to the workshop. If he was a tailor or something, you come back from school, you go to the shop and help. If it was, in our case, you come back from school and you go to the farm in the evenings.
Right.
And then on weekends, you still go to the farm over the weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, right?
We're not watching cartoons.
No, you didn't have all that luxury, So, but you also had the dimension of, religion. So, it was a country where we had the influence of Islam from the north, right, and then Christianity from the coast, majorly from England and all that through the slave trade and all that. And so majorly you have the mix of, people who are totally Christians or Muslims, but, we didn't have hate. We didn't have, you couldn't play with a Muslim or you couldn't play with the Christians. We celebrated everything. So in your house, we celebrate Christmas. We celebrate, whether I say the Fitri or but in the same family, you have Christians, you have Muslims, and you had everything. So you had an expectation to worship. So I didn't want to use religious.
Right.
You had to look up to something. You had to look up to a higher being, whether as a Christian or as a Muslim, and pray. And whether that will shape your morality and your attitude to doing good, to not stealing, to not killing, to not saying all those things that the books,
right,
whether the Quran or the Bible says you shouldn't do.
Right.
So you must learn something, right? You must have a book. So you had that expectation. You also had the expectation of you had to give back to the family. You have to help the family. So you get up in the morning, you have to do something, do your chores and all that, all the basics, right? But you must also go to school, right? You had to get an education. And you must at least get your equivalent of, the diploma here, the grade 12 diploma here, right? But beyond that, I think the society also expects somehow that post-secondary, you then take up something. You had to learn something. Either you take up a vocation, or you go into trading, or you go to an institution, you go to university or polytechnics, the equivalent of the colleges here, right? So those were very broad, clearly defined expectations, right? Everyone growing up, when I grew up in Nigeria. So, but for me, it was a lot easier knowing finishing your secondary school, you had to go to university. So the choice, and in those days, you were forced, you don't define that, you were forced to either want to be a doctor, or you want to be a lawyer, an engineer. In those were the only things that people understood.
Okay.
You know, that you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, maybe an accountant, maybe the sprinkle few who will become historians or will study pole science or something else. But majorly, they want to force you to become an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, right? Because those are the prestigious, right? Just flowing from the earliest set of, educated Nigerians went to England. Right, they'll finish high school and then they go to England. They'll do some correspondence courses in England, or they come back and then become lawyers and accountants. And those are the first set of examples. And I saw some of those who were 1-2 generations ahead of me.
Right.
So you could touch them, right?
Right,
So
and you could see that this was possible.
Absolutely.
You didn't have to continue in the line of your father.
No.
If you wanted to, you could. And
Absolutely,
there's nothing wrong with that.
right?
But you could also have hope that, man, if I wanted to be a doctor, I can be a doctor.
Absolutely.
And you see that must have been pretty cool to be able to touch those that had made that journey before you.
Absolutely.
And be able to have that hope. I mean, as a developing country, like you were saying, and where you're like struggling with basics that we kind of go, when we don't have power for an hour, we're like, what's going on, people? Like, why, and where it's completely flipped for you guys, that experience. And now you can see that there's hope and possibility.
Absolutely.
Which I think is fantastic. Okay, so I don't think it's a secret to anybody.
No.
I mean, that one of the reasons why you're here is because you have a different accent than I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. It's very thick.
But like growing up in Nigeria, we've talked about this prior, it's majority black country.
Yep.
Okay, so the differences that existed in Nigeria were not really differences like that you would face like in more of a melting pot of skin tones in North America.
Yeah.
Or in different regions, or England or Holland or different places, Germany, whatever. But you're a majority, but you did have different like ethnic backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, based on what I've learned off of Wikipedia, which I'm sure is like right on top of everything, in terms of information. There's major different lines of people groups in Nigeria. What was your first experience? Like, I from what I understand, it seemed like there was a great deal of respect in your country towards different perspectives on how to do life.
Absolutely.
When was your first experience in Nigeria of where you would say someone mistreated you because you didn't line up with their cultural group?
Yeah. So I think my first realization or knowledge of differences. I grew up post the Civil War, so we had a bitter Civil War. In the late 60s in Nigeria, a section of the country, the eastern section, they call it the Igbos, wanted to secede, and they're majorly Republican even till today, right? So, and it's difficult to, right? And I don't want to go back into the reasons and all that, but I grew up, at the end of, the recovery post the Civil War. And then you had a lot of people from that part of the country who had migrated, post the Civil War to other parts of the country. Today would be the typical refugees, right, in the other parts of the country. And the Igbos at that point were more industrial, so they were struggling because they had been impoverished by the war, obviously. Right. So we're struggling to quickly set up businesses. So even businesses that, people in my part of the country then didn't know anything about. So because some of them had trained as nurses, we had a lot more nurses in the Southeast, by the way, at that point in the 60s. So many of them had trained as nurses. So coming to other parts of the country, they were quick to establish small clinics, work as midwives, set up what they call pharmacies. Right. So even dispense and all that drugs. So these were my earliest, introduction to other cultures at that point. We're like, okay, so we're not just one. So they're Igbos, okay. And we're all Nigerians, by the way. Right. And then at some point, we also had the infiltration of people from the north, the Hausas. And majorly then will come as traders and you see do, nomadic cattle rearers and all that. You see them come down south. And so, but from my point, I was in the majority at that point. Right. So it was, you will see how others were treated. Even as someone growing up, you probably didn't know that they were not right? Yeah. Then at a point, we had Ghana wasn't doing very well economically. And then people had to leave Ghana for other countries, right? So a lot of Ghanaians came to Nigeria to work. So and it was at that point, I think I'd moved to my secondary school at some point. And we had a lot of engineers, and doctors from Ghana who came to Nigeria to work as doctors. As teachers, right? They couldn't work as doctors,
right?
But they could work as teachers. They could work as elementary school teachers. They work as tailors, mobile tailors, cobblers, and all that, just to survive.
Right.
And then it got to a point, and just throwing to the bit of xenophobia and the ordering, and that it really became an issue having that many number of Ghanaians in Nigeria.
Right.
And a particular phrase actually sprung up: Ghana must go. Right. So Ghanaians were asked to leave.
So it was like, and
right?
from the perspective though, I mean, if you're a country,
right,
and you're a people group, and then all of a sudden there's like a massive wave, and they're almost overwhelming you.
Absolutely.
To the point where you're going to lose your culture. It feels like that. Like, I mean, they're like,
maybe those would have been the justifications.
Yeah.
Whereas nobody was coming to steal anyone's culture.
No, but like it can feel like it because in a human sense, you have somebody now, every teacher you go to is from Ghana.
Right.
And they're going to teach you.
And we didn't have science teachers, but they were the only science teachers we had. My first physics teacher was a Ghanaian, right? My first chemistry teacher was a Ghanaian. And when they left, I had no physics teacher.
Right.
When they left, I had no chemistry teacher.
So you would prefer to have had a physics
Absolutely.
teacher, right?
So, some of those feelings still permeate and still filters. Even till today, we still believe that someone is coming to steal our culture or to steal your way of life. And it wasn't, we didn't see the Ghanaians as people needing help, people who had left their country because there was a big issue, because they weren't doing well, because the economy had collapsed and all that, and that just needed.
They're literally trying to save their lives.
Absolutely. And someone from North America, and I'm saying that respectfully, to a white person landing in Africa, we all look the same. Right? Right? In Sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, a Ghanaian or a Nigerian or Togolese, we're all the same.
Right.
But even we as Nigerians, we knew, or we could differentiate between Nigeria and a Ghanaian. And even within Nigeria, right, there are almost 400 languages. There are 3 major ethnic groups. And I'm a Yoruba person, right? I would say I'm not an Hausa person. So I easily, when I say an Hausa person, I know. But to someone from North America, we're all the same.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. A Nigerian is a Nigerian, a West African is a West African. So but at what point, and I know in the evolution of man and languages and cultures, we're all meant to have moved out of Babel, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, people will have moved.
We all come from the same right, beginning point. Like,
absolutely, right? So my hope is that we see others, less of, using that lens of where they come from,
right?
And use more of who they are as a person, right? So looking back, over how we treated the Ghanaians as Nigerians, then just taking it back to my experience now, and now the coin has been flipped. Now I have a lot more Nigerians going to Ghana, right, to live or to settle, and then expecting that Ghanaians will remember how they were treated, right? A particular jute bag, jute bag that people now use to travel, actually was created in that time because they had to leave Nigeria in a hurry. So they created those bags in a hurry to move out of Nigeria with their belongings. That jute bag thing was created, and it's still called Ghana Must Go bag in West Africa till today. Right?
Wow, eh?
You can imagine how insulting that even seeing that bag is to a Ghanaian. Right?
It's very interesting because, growing up in a, and I mean, we talk about the least form of being able to differentiate people. I mean, when we talk about skin tone,
right?
I mean, it's so base. It's so ridiculous that there's that matters.
Yeah, it does.
But even in North American white culture, if we're gonna say it that way, my experience is in terms of different culture. I never really I didn't understand that people were different. I don't know, and maybe it was just a little bit of my. I grew up with an East Indian neighbor. Yeah. I mean, he was always at our house. I mean, we basically considered him our third brother. Yeah. I mean, my parents didn't want more kids, but we found more. We were out in the neighborhood. We brought more in because we were going to have a bigger family. And then, I never really understood why people would be upset at people because of
they're different.
Well, just that differences. But I didn't even really understand like cultural differences so much, and maybe it was just my naiveness to how people could be so making decisions on such levels, that because everybody wants to protect their little piece of the pie, right? And I think that's what it really comes down to. And and that might be a bit of a statement that jumps ahead, but like when you have a big piece of the pie, you want to keep it for your people, right? Like, and that's how kind of people look at that, instead of being willing to like...
Could we bake more pie?
Yeah, like there's lots of pie guys.
Absolutely.
Like, there's lots. But like even experiencing in white culture, there's a lot of like, oh, if you're not... There's different expressions. If you're not Dutch, you're not much.
Yeah.
Right? There's different... And not to pick on Dutch people, but those expressions exist in almost every cultural group.
Absolutely.
If you don't do it our way, then you're not doing it right. Like, and I find that fascinating that it doesn't matter necessarily, it's easy for me to say, Afeez, he's black. Nope.
Yeah, no, talk to you.
That's simple, but we still do that even with people with the same skin tone.
I know.
And we think it's just, it's just racism is what we would like to jump to. And in a sense it is, but it doesn't matter that it's skin tone.
Whether it's on the basis of color or the basis of accent or something, right?
We do it on anything that we can find.
I know.
So that it keeps what I want and keeps you away from that for some reason.
Right.
And that's pretty wild. And I'm fascinated to hear that perspective, because I face some of that as a white person.
Wow.
But like you don't get the same job opportunities as other people do because you're not in their cultural background.
You're right.
So if the city is mostly made up of, whatever English people, let's say,
you're right,
and you're not English, maybe you're Irish or maybe you're German or maybe they're not going to hire you into those positions because they're going to hire the children of the people who are from their people group. But they're going to hire the guy's son who has worked in the company for the last 40 years. And I understand that because you know who he is and you know how his dad was. But to break into that is hard.
It is.
Right? Like, I've heard about stories in New York where like the policing was all, Irish in different areas. So if you try to come into that, good luck.
Irish,
they're only going to hire, they're only going to hire their background. They're only going to hire their, and it's fascinating that, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit later as we journey through how we do this thing of hating on people in North America. It almost seems a little different than how it's done elsewhere. And
absolutely,
it's an interesting conversation. But okay, so Nigeria, you get your education, you go to post-secondary. Following post-secondary, when was did you then go to like university, college, or did you start working? Did you move from Nigeria and go to England? Tell me about your story from there. And jumping from the Nigerian majority black culture
to mono.
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating. I think this is an incredible story. Like,
absolutely.
The difference now that you're going to experience coming from there.
So I think the first one, of course, going back my story, I did my university in Nigeria, started working. First degree in biochemistry originally, then started working.
Worked for Pfizer, right?
I did Pfizer. I was
Cheers.
detailing drugs and all that, pharmacies, and then worked in the brewing industry and at the telecoms industry at the advent of GSM telephony in Nigeria. And then left for England. So I'd worked a bit. I started a family when I left Nigeria for England, but I then went with my family also. So I went as an international student, and then curiously decided it was wise of me to also go with family, which was
so. When you first left as an international student, did your family stay in Nigeria?
No, we moved together.
You moved together.
So it was tough.
Is that typical?
No, it wasn't.
So
but for me, I couldn't leave my kids, right? So I just said, no, it's impossible. If I was going to do anything that they wouldn't go with me, then I wouldn't do that thing. So moved.
How is that decision viewed? Like in terms of you weren't gonna, because a lot of cultural groups will like send the husband ahead.
And then
bring them.
If it was
but you were like, I'm not going to do that.
I wasn't going to do that, right? And
so you weren't going to leave unless you could bring them.
Absolutely, and I took that decision a couple of times. Even after that, that also shaped two other decisions that I took after that, including where we're going to stay in Canada and all those, and when we're going to come to Canada, or whether we're coming to Canada or any other country, because I also had two other options that I'd consider. If I went to I had New Zealand as an option. I would.
New Zealand?
Yep, I did travel to New Zealand, spent 10 days, And I said, nope. It's too far from everywhere, right?
Well, it's not that far from Nigeria to England,
yeah,
right? Comparatively, like
and everyone's moving up north. I'm not going down south. Okay, so but so I left. So it was the first time that really hit me, right? That I was different, really. Well, properly, apart from the time when I was growing up and seeing even as blacks, from other parts of Nigeria or as West Africans, was when I landed in England, and it was not obvious, especially when I then moved to Yorkshire.
Okay, yeah,
West Yorkshire, right?
Majority white,
right?
What would be the more ethnic area in England?
Will be the southeast London.
Okay,
where you find a lot more Africans or Nigerians.
Right. Okay.
Definitely Peckham.
Right. Okay.
Or Camberwell and all that. So
you moved to the place where this wasn't
right. But I think surprisingly, I think I also got just the benefit of people's generosity and the fact that people are human and treated you as human. I was surprised genuinely. Right. I went to school there. I did not experience maybe the odd, look back or, someone make the odd monkey sign on their armpit. You see that, right? They think, yeah, people do that.
Really?
Yeah. But you learn how to live with this, right? Sometimes you don't want to live with it, but you want to stay alive, right?
Right.
So you're walking on the road. You see it's 6, 7 p.m. in the evening. You see a group of young men coming back from the pub or something, you're going to take the other side of the road. You don't want to walk through them.
Right.
Because you're not looking for trouble.
Right.
Because you're different.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the reality, right? Living where you're different, totally different. And it's a young man who probably don't know any better than to, look for a way to stir up trouble or something. So you take the other path. Cross over. And
we don't have to have an issue.
You survive that day.
Right.
The next day, I haven't come here to look for trouble. I came here for an education. I'm going to get an education. I'm going to stay alive.
That's a real
right?
flip in the head, eh?
Absolutely. Coming from where you didn't have to worry about what you look like, what you sound like, your accent or, how you speak, to where you have to be conscious that you have to slow down when you speak because people can hear you clearly. Right. You have to ask, did I come through? Well, did you hear me? Am I too fast for you? Am I too slow for you?
And you've never had to think about these things before, which is it's a big step.
Absolutely.
Because now you have to change almost like who you are.
And you have to do it in a positive way.
Right.
Because sometimes people don't hear you, not because they don't want to hear you, but because they're not used to your accent.
Right.
Right? If you go with the mindset of, yeah, they don't want to hear me because they're pretending. Because that happens, right? You might think they're pretending that you're not speaking out clearly or they don't want to hear you because they're different. The reality is maybe they've never heard someone of your accent before, right? And you're just confusing their brain.
It takes a lot of it takes a lot of character though to not judge people
absolutely
immediately that they're not the kind that you have to worry about.
Absolutely.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, especially if you've gone through something where people have specifically targeted and hated on you.
Yep.
I could see how it'd be very easy then when someone is like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
Sorry, what? Sorry, what? And they just treat you like you're not even human.
Absolutely.
Which I think...
So, in that journey I've learned, to also condition how you speak. You slow down. Sometimes you try and catch up, and then you ask, right? Sometimes, do you understand what I'm saying? So at the point I was saying, do you understand? Do you understand?
Almost drive you crazy.
Right, because you just want to be sure that you haven't created a barrier, right, in communicating with that person, right? And that you're not also judging and that you're not, right, making that person who they're not, obviously.
It's taking the effort to make the connection.
Absolutely, right.
Rather than this is an opportunity for me to further disconnect.
Or to claim racism, right? Oh, no, right?
Okay, so you come to England, and your first experience. Like I remember a friend who was he was a pastor in Grenada,
right?
And he talks about coming to the United States for the first time,
right?
As a young guy,
right?
And his experience getting off the plane. He was like, in Grenada, he's like, in case you didn't know, if there was a white person there, they were a missionary, or they were there, right? That's what he would say. And then when he landed in Florida, he was like, he found there was only one other person in the entire airport, he said, that had my skin color.
okay.
And he screamed across the airport at that person. And he was like, "Hey!" And the person was like,
I don't
what
know
are you
you.
doing?
I don't know you. What do you want?
Like, well, you're the only one. And he wanted to feel at least a little bit. Like it was such a shock to be out of the norm. And now I can only imagine the different things that you had to quickly. I think it speaks to your character. And like, did your dad or did anybody in your family give you any advice, or your teachers or any, as you started your journey out of Nigeria into places where they knew you could be judged by something different than the person you are? Is there anything that you can remember of somebody sharing that with you? Because clearly, I mean, you're making decisions now on the ground and on the fly,
right?
That are safety, but also not to judge people. Or were you simply doing it because that's how you wanted people to treat you?
I think beyond how you want to be treated by others, I think you're conditioned by the environments you probably grew up in, right? So the sum total of your upbringing, what you've been exposed to, and that's the benefit of education, right? So one of the tasks or the deliverables that you put before an education is to grow the next generation, not just in terms of knowledge and application to world things, but how the next generation also turns out in how they treat others. So, and you can break that into two. So the school system, the formal school system, obviously you'll expect to create the next set of future engineers or scientists or programmers and broadcasters. And you want them to do that in a way that applies to the circumstances of their own future and to be able to do that properly. But what is that formal structure that is creating the next set of generation to think, to have humanity, to be humane, to be credible, to not judge others, to so even as to be free thinkers, to to have an open mind, to not be to not tag others and other, how we build in that. Right. So growing up, majorly in a culture where we were easing into the written words, most of our cultures in Africa were majorly oral. And I could still touch some of those 2-3 generations ahead of you, right? So books were still in their highly formative state, being written, history books and all that, and our local books were just being written in different languages. But most of our cultures and practices were oral, were passed down through songs, through observation, through storytelling. And in some of those songs and storytelling and practices that you observe, you have things about how you not treat others, how you treat others, how you want to be treated, the things that you would, irrespective of your religion, by the way, and I don't want to stress too much into religion, right? But, you have those basics of do not steal, and we still see some of those in some of the rural areas, even in the West, where a farmer will put their produce by the roadside and leave units of rock or whatever indicating the prices. You just pay, leave your money there. It's not something, right? So we grew up learning some of those basics. Do not take what doesn't belong to you. You can borrow in good faith and return in good faith. You treat others how you want to be treated. So if you took those lessons properly growing up, I think it would be a lot easier for one to live through them or to exhibit them or to show them as you grow up and in your relationship with others. You don't give what you don't have is my thing. So I think my upbringing, I think, had a lot to play in what I became or what I've become today, right? And how I was able to transition into other cultures, particularly when I moved to England and not assume that I was being treated differently because this person hated me or in any way. But maybe this person doesn't understand you or doesn't understand your culture. And sometimes people will ask you, where are you from? We think today that when someone asks you where you're from, that they're being racist, that they're trying to let you know that you're different, that you don't belong here. Or say, where are you really, really from? And sometimes we don't. Some will say, don't answer that. I will answer. Oh, I'm originally from Nigeria. What can I tell you about where I'm from? Right?
Yeah.
So maybe they're genuinely interested in where you're from. It's saying they know you're not from here.
Right.
Right? Originally. Right? So I won't take offense if you ask me, where are you from? I will answer that. And I'll probe again. What do you want to know? about where I'm from, and I'm happy and willing to share my stories if you want to listen.
Yeah, it could be a connective question and not just a question so I can base my judgments even further on all my algorithms in my head of, to get to know someone.
Right.
I mean, change is everything.
Absolutely. So,
and if we just allow ourselves to get to know each other.
Yep.
So here you are in England. You're doing your post-secondary school education.
Yeah.
What university were you at?
Huddersfield, University of Huddersfield.
And what were you taking there?
I was doing masters in information systems, so programming and all that, building sites and Java and all that, and IS management and projects and all that.
Were you still working as you were going through school and
I was working, so I was allowed to work some hours. So fortunately, I got a job. So I was working those hours. I was working in the entertainment industry.
What?
We call it. But it's betting industry. So I was working with Coral Racing, like the gambling company, right? So I was an assistant manager, even so I could process bets, horse racing, dog racing, and all those.
So you're in England, you have your wife, and you have a daughter.
I had two.
You have two already?
Originally, and then the third one came in England in 2000.
So now you got 3 kids. Yeah. You're doing your post-secondary education. You're working a job.
It was tough.
You're busy.
I was very busy.
That's busy.
I don't know how the third one came. I thought I was supposed to be busy. I was supposed to be busy.
I'm sure your wife would tell you how this happened. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, clearly, a man who wants to take care of his family, and to build a future,
absolutely,
for himself. Okay. So you're doing your education in England. At this point, returning back to Nigeria at all, or just now you're in England and now you're trying to build a life? Did you think that England was going to be your finishing point, or?
That's interesting. So at the point, I thought England was going to be home, fully. I was, taking those steps to ensure that I had the permanent residence and all that. But then I attended a couple of seminars, and then I was watching some crazy programs on TV now. One of them is Wanted Down Under in Australia, right? And you see families, not black families, who live in England, and going to Australia and New Zealand, going through that skilled migrant scheme. And I said, okay, what's that? And then I attended a seminar where Canada was also promoting Canada as a destination for, Britons or for UK citizens to come to Canada. And I attended that seminar, and that was interesting. And I said, okay, so maybe that's something to consider. So I started checking them out. Okay. And all they wanted was if you had a postgrad, you had this length of years of experience and all that, you could apply to come to Canada. And I said, okay, maybe I should do that. And I just sat in my living room one night and I said, you know what? And I went on a computer and I submitted. And okay. And I forgot about it, really. And then a couple of weeks after that, I think, I then went on the New Zealand website as well. I checked where New Zealand was on the map. It was
wait.
And I applied and I left it there. Because I built my career up to a point in Nigeria where in those days people could look you up and could see that you were a talent outside the country. I started getting calls back from Nigeria to come work. So then S.C. Johnson then contacted me and asked if I wanted to go back to Nigeria as one of the executive directors in the company. And it appealed to me. I looked at the opportunities. Another company also reached out, MTN, a telecom company, and asked if I wanted to come back. And so I looked at that and I felt, okay, why not take it? So I took the S.C. Johnson one. And a year after that, I moved my family back. But I knew that I could always come back to England if I wanted to.
Right.
But my family was with me, so I moved my family back. And then the New Zealand visa came out.
When you were back in Nigeria, now you're going to go to New Zealand to check it out there.
Ugh. So I said, okay, I was going to take a vacation. So an interesting story, almost like a backpack, kind of. I had just a knapsack, and I went to New Zealand. And I said, okay, I'll spend maybe a couple of days in Australia, and then the Australian border, it was almost like an episode of border security. Like, who the hell are you? Where are you going? I said, New Zealand. I said, I'm not packed. What do you have? I said, where's your money? I don't have money on me. I'm spending plastic. I said, what do you work? They went through all my stuff. I was telling that story. It was actually after I left the airport. I found out they had opened all my shoes and all that.
They're looking to see.
Destroyed my shoes. Totally. I didn't realize. Anyway, I went to New Zealand.
And it was just because you had a backpack, and they're like, "What is happening?"
What the hell?
Here?
An African boy from the middle of nowhere.
He's got nothing.
He must be doing drugs. He's a drug mule. So anyway,
I wouldn't even have thought that. I was like,
he must be a drug mule. Anyway, I went to New Zealand. I went to the two islands, the North and the South Island, Auckland and Christchurch, and he didn't take it for me. I said, no. So I went back. I said, no, I'm not taking my family to New Zealand. I said, so curiously, the Canadian visa then came out. And I said, okay, now I think we can do it.
You're like you're just like, that's a lot of miles that you were racking up on planes.
Yeah, I said no. So, and here we are, loving every, moment. I'm so happy that we took the opportunity and that we got the opportunity when we took it, that my family and my kids are doing well here.
So you've been now in Canada for
almost 10 years.
10 years.
Almost 10 years now.
10 years now. Okay, so you come to Canada. Did you continue your education here, or did you just jump right into the workforce?
The typical thing, right, about how Canada uses or doesn't optimize totally. I love what I do now. I work with the Ministry of Education. But you have so many immigrants who come into Canada who claim that they're not optimized, right? You have doctors, you have engineers, you have lawyers who have to recertify here and who take the very long road to recertification. And then, within that journey, we had to be working as Uber drivers or as delivery drivers.
Can you share a little bit about, like, this is something that I've always kind of just shook my head about.
Right.
Because based on what I see, you're from Nigeria, but you're highly educated.
Yeah. So.
And my assumption would be is that people who are doctors and lawyers in other countries are highly educated as well.
Absolutely.
Like very highly educated.
Absolutely.
And we're practicing medicine.
Yeah.
In their countries. What's our problem with that?
Right. So I'm
if you were to just be straight, is it just fear? Is it like we don't think your education is good enough, so blah? Or is there more to it than that?
I would think it's a combination of and just being very fair also to the structures or the whatever system is created, all those what people see as barriers to people optimizing themselves in new environments, just being fair to them as well. I would think it's a combination of factors. So one, obviously, you would have trust in systems. People who come from certain countries where they're not as rigorous as we are in Canada, either with their exams, either with their supervision, either with their certification. So obviously, before you even come to Canada, you have to go through a certification, a qualification assessment system where your original qualifications are seen by a body in Canada and assessed to be genuine. Right, your transcripts are seen because you don't trust fully, and because the world is such a diverse place now.
Like I understand that, but there's got to be a better way.
I think we also you might have a bit of significant, possibly in certain instances between practices. So maybe someone from Nigeria might be an infectious diseases person who is treated malaria or typhoid or something, or someone who's treated a tropical disease all his life, maybe malaria and other things that we don't have in Canada, right? So it might be that you want to ease them into a peculiar medical, practices and all that. And ethics of practicing medicine across boundaries might also differ, right? How patients are treated in other cultures might differ from how patients are treated here. I'm sure they have medical insurance and all that. You want to be sure that they are not a liability to the system and they are sued every second because malpractices.
But like we started our conversation talking about the from the Guyanese or Ghana people coming to your country and working.
Right.
And then it got too much and they were like, okay, you got to go back.
Yeah.
Like my biggest fear would be that's what we're doing. In a sense, like I know we set up protections to make sure that you're properly educated but are we just trying to keep the pie to ourselves in some of these ways? Like it can't possibly be the case that all these doctors and lawyers and people who are highly educated should be driving taxis. Like they should not be bus drivers.
There's no reason why that should,
Like we should be able to facilitate. Like if you're that well trained, we need you.
Should be good enough to work here, right?
We need you.
So I would think that we should have a much more, a simpler way of integrating people, highly skilled new Canadians, into the workforce here, whatever their calling is, whether it's as engineers. But I think we have so many barriers.
And I don't say that as a knock to Uber drivers or taxi drivers.
Absolutely, no.
If that's the field you want to work in, that's great.
But
if you've trained to be a doctor and you want to be a doctor and you want
should be
to
able to work as a doctor,
right?
Like, and if opted out to not work as a doctor, it should be a personal choice, right?
Right.
It shouldn't be because you're forced as an engineer not to work as an engineer, then you work in retail or you work in a warehouse or something, right? So,
do you think people can see that as hate as well? Like you don't respect. Like I understand we have different levels and different layers, and I'm not trying to come across as just criticizing all of that. But coming from a place where you've worked hard to get yourself into a position of being a highly trained, specialized person, and then you come to a white North America that says, it's not good enough. You know what I mean? Like it can be viewed as being
it obviously can be, and I think, and I'll be careful here because especially if you don't have the full story, for every circumstance, right?
Right.
And if you don't see it in the professional assessment or qualifying organization, all right, it's also difficult to peer into them and see totally what they are thinking, right? But it might be an evolution of a much more earlier thinking or position,
right,
that is probably justified or that you can probably tag that way. But whatever the rationale is, right, I think there are opportunities for us to continue to strengthen, even where we are protecting our workplace, whether it's health and safety, in the case of engineers or architects and other practitioners in that space, ensuring that their knowledge or the practices aligns with our local practices. That ensures that Canadians are kept safe and that we're building the right kind of housing, right, or bridges or roads, and that people understand.
See, I don't care if somebody comes from a different background. I don't care what they look like. I care that when I go to the hospital, that doctor's the best doctor that I can have in front of me, and I have the best opportunity to have a better life.
Absolutely.
But I just want to make sure they do. Like, it should be both ways. Like, if I have an expectation for the best teachers, then I should also make sure that we can have the best teachers.
I think so. I think foreign practitioners in different fields, I think, have a lot easier integration in America than in Canada. And you hear that in some of the comments. Saw the family coming from India 2 weeks ago that died on the planes, right? Froze to death and all that. I mean, they originally got Canadian visas, but the ultimate destination was U.S., right? And so people wonder, why you live in Canada? Why would they not stay in Canada? You don't know their story, right? You don't know whether the head of the family felt he couldn't practice his skills in Canada, and felt it was a lot easier for them to. But that's an unfortunate one, and I hope they are resting in a good place.
Very sad.
Yeah, very, very sad. Yeah,
All right, so jumping ahead, family in Canada, living in London, Ontario, which by all accounts, like my experience over the last 45 years, is London is a very multicultural location.
It is, yeah.
Like a lot of different backgrounds. Like a very wide spectrum of different, European backgrounds and also like non-European backgrounds. So it's colorful.
Absolutely.
You go to White Oaks Mall and you see every color and every person and every kind of, you just walk through the food court and you can hear all sorts of different, it's so cool.
Yeah.
What has your experience been like living in London, Canada, compared to like England or maybe some of these other destinations that you
interesting.
Like, how have you been treated in terms of your humanity, in terms of treating you based on, again, the content of who you are,
right,
as
rather
opposed
than what
to
you look
just
like.
Right.
Yeah, I think London is transitioned, and we are all evolving, even as humans, as individuals, as organizations that we differently belong to. In response to so many things. And as a country, obviously, Canada, and obviously the small pocket wherever we live, whether it's London and even here, right? We're constantly shifting and responding to different stimuli, right? And those stimuli might be laws, that compel us to change.
Right.
It might be that introduce diversity in your organization. It might be that introduce consciousness for bias or for recognizing when you tip the scale. So those will come. It might also be in response to the general feelings in the society and how society is moving in its own. So if it was acceptable to tag a particular race or culture or color by a particular name 20 years ago, that suddenly is not acceptable today.
Right.
Or to call someone a name because of their sexual orientation or their gender or what they look like or who they love and all that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, suddenly isn't acceptable. As it's even probably criminal to even do it, right? Because it's been codified into law, right? So I think London is not an exception in how that is shifted, but I probably have seen a lot more, aggressive shift. When I came in, I think it was a lot more quote unquote conservative London when I got to London, right? When we settled fully in 2015, I think I also saw some of those changes. You will see, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, has been, particularly opened up. I think respect and understanding that we're a lot more diverse and open and inclusive environment. I think is permeated, whether it's at the city level, in terms of the city hall and the policies and where they put their funding, whether it's at the provincial level in terms of understanding and building into policies and laws, whether it's even at the federal level and how that shapes totally. I think London particularly has taken a full advantage of that. I've seen a lot more inclusive, open and welcoming city. I worked with, volunteer rather, with the LMLIP, London and Middlesex Local Immigration Partnership, right? And that's why I won the I Am London Award in 2018, right? So they do a lot, and they get funding from, so you see a lot. Some of the programs, things that probably wouldn't have been conceived or thought possible in London, say 20 years ago or 15 years ago. Things like lawn signs that says, all are welcome here.
Right.
You probably wouldn't be able to put those in some neighborhoods 20 years ago, 50, without getting your windows smashed.
Yeah.
But people now put proudly, on their lawns, all are welcome here. Welcome act of kindness and all those words that are permitted. And even check the noises online, maybe Twitter and tag the cities and see what people are talking about. You see a lot more understanding that we might look different, we might worship differently, we might love differently, we might have different genders, but that we're all one as human beings. And we're just here as Canadians, wanting the best for ourselves as individuals and wanting the best for the next generation of Canadians that will come behind us. So wherever you work, whether you're working in the city, whether you're working in the hospital, whether you're a researcher, whether you're a teacher, a professor, you're just creating a system that ensures that the next set of Canadians continue to live, in this beautiful land, as Canadians, enjoying the best that we've been given by nature.
So let's jump into the arena where we can have the most fun.
Right.
I think we have about 18 minutes left of our high tech recording capabilities here at the Peanut Gallery. But let's jump into politics for a few minutes. And and this past election was your first venture
into politics.
Canada, right. I want to talk a little bit about how you were viewed. Like you put your name into the hat for this riding of Elgin, Middlesex, London, and definitely not the most diverse riding. In terms of cultural diversity, yes. And what I mean by that is probably European-centric diversity. So lots of different shades of white.
Greek or Italian or
but
German.
Not a whole lot of shades that are not white.
Right. That's true.
So what were your experiences like in terms of how people treated you on the campaign trail, how they received you? What was your perception of, like, obviously you did fairly well in terms of the campaign and the number of votes that you garnered. Right. So it wouldn't appear from the outside that people were judging you because you were the only black candidate in our riding. How did you feel like your treatment was, and what are some of the things that you saw in terms of how this region welcomed you?
Right, and I think I don't know if I was asked to do this again, and people ask, "Will you do it again?" I say yes, 10 times I will.
Really,
same riding, and I say yes, absolutely. Because I didn't jump into it because I wanted an easy ride, or because I wanted, an easy ride to Parliament. I wanted to represent. And I thought I had specific, apart from the party platform, obviously, whether it's a $10 a day for childcare, whether it's a response to climate emergency and carbon pricing and future investments in that space, whether it's response to the housing crisis. I also had specific in my head things that I thought could benefit, from my expertise and knowledge, whether it's in just consciousness to what farmers are going through and how they're represented, their viewpoints are represented in some of the agreements that we signed, like the USMCA and all that, or whether it's in clearly articulated position on housing and how you can leverage your position locally to help close that. I mean, this is winter, and this is particularly hard time for people who are homeless, right? So in that sense, I think I took my time to understand the party's platform, and I was able to talk about those platforms clearly, and I thought they were credible platforms. 2, I think I also took my time to also articulate what my personal position was with respect to representing locally the EML riding, and how people could benefit, from that position and my energies. I'm still a young man who has all the time, even if I'm already above 50, right? And initially, I think there was doubt. Right. When I first threw my hat, what the hell is it? Even within the party, people didn't know me. So, we don't know you, right? So, and the story was there that I wanted to try from London West originally, right? And it was, we don't know him. Who the hell is he? Yeah. Right? To when I then got acclaimed as a candidate for EML. And then went into the hard work and then the community engagement and knocking at doors and speaking with people. And I think I then started shaping some of my ideas and thoughts and thinking at the beginning of the campaign with what I was hearing at the doors. Right. It was easy to breeze through the doors because we wanted to knock on as many doors as we could in 3 weeks. Yeah. Right. We had this incredibly, very tiny, small team of hardworking volunteers who were on the campaign trail with us. I was almost like the campaign director, particularly. Come on, don't kill me. How many doors are you knocking today? Where are you walking today? It's calling you at 7 a.m. in the morning. So what's your plan for today? Where are you walking today? How many doors? Okay, I'm going to be doing this. I need you to do this. I need a minimum of 500 from you, and I need da-da-da. And say, okay, this is going to kill me. So, but I think at the point, I started shaping some of those thoughts with what I was hearing at the door. So whether I was someone who was battling, at that point, at the peak of the lockdown, was battling with just being alone, an elderly person, and the mental health fallbacks of some of those, or whether someone who was struggling, who had run out of EI and was on the CBR payment and was still struggling to make ends meet, someone who was struggling with accommodation or some other stuff going on in people's life, and just looking for someone to listen to them, even if you had no solution. They just wanted you to listen. Yeah, you get the odd one of, don't touch my door, don't come here, oh, you're this party, I don't want to talk to you, or label you. But I think I did not see, and I'm just being fair to myself now, it might be the odd one that you would think responded to you because of how you sounded. Right. Maybe you knock, and the first thing out, you're different, you speak differently, and they hear the accent immediately, and be like, no, I can't deal with this. You might get that, but you don't know why they don't want to deal with you. Maybe they just don't want to be bothered at that time, right? So you get those odd ones but in my head, I wouldn't assume that this person didn't want to speak with me because of how I sounded. But you don't know, right? So you might get the odd ones out. But I think the majority of those that we knocked, the majority of people that we spoke to, because we also had a small pamphlet that listed everything about me, majority of those who saw those say, whoa, you're a good candidate, but either because I don't belong to your party, either because I'm not voting, either because of I'm not going to vote for you. But you are an absolutely solid candidate. And, apart from this, or you, okay, I haven't voted in elections, in 2 or 3 elections, but I'm going to vote for you, right? Because I think you are a solid candidate. So we got a lot of those, right?
Wow, that's awesome.
Feedback, so.
I mean, outside of people coming, like you said, other side of people like, whoa, liberal communism. No.
Yeah. We got a lot.
I think there's a shade of conservative communism that's around here too. To be fair, to be honest, I want to ask you, how do you feel about I mean, obviously you've had experiences of, you're different and you're going to be judged by that. How do you feel about the level of conversation in politics where it seems like political figures go to the base level of putting out advertisements that attack each other and really, in many ways, really spew a lot of hate towards other ideologies? I mean, you go to media, you go to our mainstream media, social media, you go to just political ads, and like from every party group. Like Trudeau's first run, he wasn't as aggressively attacking other groups.
Yeah.
It seems like this past election, there's a little bit of a tenor that's changed in his tone. And the one thing I liked about his first election campaign run is like he wasn't going to do that.
Right.
And whether that was just because he knew he was going to win, so he didn't need to, it wasn't like the way, or he changed his approach now.
Right.
But how do you think the way our politicians treat each other, how do you think that impacts us as people that are watching and following and wanting you guys to lead us?
Okay, so I think my response to that would be that sometimes we underestimate the understanding of Canadians. We have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, right? One of the highest. So below all that noise, majority of Canadians understand the core issues that are very dear to them.
Mm-hmm.
They can read the party platforms. Majority of Canadians will read, will understand. They know. Apart from, how we've also been shaped by upbringing and all that. So whether I'm core, whatever happens, whatever sits on your platform, I'm Liberal, or I'm NDP, or I'm Conservative. You also have majority of the people who don't care, but we just want to see who is going to serve them, right? Yes. And who will read. So I think we tend to underestimate that Canadians can do that, right? And that are doing that, and that are going through the party platforms, and they don't care about that noise, and that they are not going to. They will see what is trending on Twitter or the, vitriol that you're throwing about on Facebook in terms of comments and Trudeau blackface and all that people write. Below that noise, I think people can see.
Yeah.
And we tend to think Canadians are not smart. No, we are very smart people. We understand. So we know who is going to invest clearly in providing us X, Y, Z, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare, ensuring that we don't commercialize our healthcare or throw it into the hands of private corporations or all that. We know what we enjoy as Canadians, and we know what we don't want to throw away. So, but I think
let me ask you,
right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think people can read.
Right.
Then why the advertisement that just seems like it's always going after each other? I mean, if we can, I know it's psychology, and I know we're diving into that a little bit, but it always seems like, right now, and it actually pains me. I really hate the fact that there's a bunch of people who say that they're people of faith, and they got banners up that say F Trudeau.
Absolutely.
That bothers me.
And we're not discussing the issues.
Right.
And
we're not discussing why you want,
Right.
I don't think that's appropriate.
No.
That's a husband. That's a father.
Absolutely.
That's a man who put his hand,
Absolutely.
And my perspective on him has always been, he's underestimated in terms of, a lot of people see him as just the rich white guy. But he's fiery, and he's got backbone.
Absolutely.
And he's not afraid to get in and scrap. There's more to him. But on the same thing, on the other side, if you vote conservative, you're voting for big corporation, and you're supporting white culture.
No.
You know what I mean?
I know.
It drives me nuts that I don't think these things are true, but we always see the ads that are perpetuating these kind of myths about each other. And it really bothers me. The Liberal Party platform, I agree with the majority of what's in there. The NDP platform, I agree with the majority of what's in there.
I mean, who doesn't want their tuition forgiven? right?
And
who doesn't want free? Who wants high taxes? Nobody wants.
I think Jamie isn't.
Right?
I think every leader of the groups that are out there are fantastic leaders.
Absolutely.
And there's another thing that bothers me. If you get into cabinet,
yeah,
and you're my representative, if I vote you in as my Liberal representative to Liberal government, I think it should be against government rules that they kick you out of the party until the next election. because I voted you in.
As a representative.
And you're my voice.
Absolutely.
And if the guy at the top doesn't like my voice,
and kick you out of caucus, right?
Right, he's going to kick you out of caucus.
Right.
But aren't we supposed to be diverse in our opinions about how things are supposed to be done? And instead of hating on someone who's not going to toe the line, shouldn't we have a conversation with that person and say, how can we bridge this gap instead of you're gone, like get out of the room?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're not going to go with what I say, so get out of the room. Like, I think that's kind of that's poor treatment.
Absolutely. And that goes to my earlier comment about that we're just custodians, right, of every facet of our life for the next generation, whether it's even our politics, whether it's technology, whether it's culture, music, theater, or whatever form of contact or touch points we as humans have. We're just custodians of those points of life for the next set of generation, right? So politics is to be much more sophisticated and issue-driven, and debates and talks will be clearly, even if you see it on opposite sides or the two ends of the divide, whether you're whatever tag or this and that. So your position on healthcare, you want to debate and tell me why that position is better than mine. Whether it's self-funded, government-funded, privately funded, insurance-funded. Give me the pros and cons. Your position on taxation, on personal income tax or corporate taxes, what threshold or bands it should be, should be issue-driven and should be clearly driven by, well-articulated, well-thought-through analysis and all. And we've moved across the bulk of the developed countries, the world, right, from those very sophisticated ways, debates and ways of managing, of running politics and the polity to people-based, who is more corrupt, who is da-da-da, this is this is right, and all those tags of orders that we've started, which is not right, because apart from the structures that we now have in universities that are teaching political science properly and teaching people to think credibly and clearly and thoughtfully around those issues, we're probably polluting and destroying that polity for the next set of generation, right? Because they'll think that's the right way to do politics, but that's not the right way to do politics, right? So in those days, you could. If you talk about Cuba, you knew what it stood for, and you knew, and it wasn't based on any tagging that was virulent. It was just the ideology.
Right.
The whole Soviet Union, you knew what it stood for, and it was based on very clearly articulated positioning on tax, on welfare, on commonwealth, and how it should be applied, right? But today we still have those huge thoughts, and it's our choice as developed democracies to have those opportunities and to have those choices and to sit, anywhere you want to sit within those divides. But we should be able to strip all those and remove the bitterness, and that allow someone to put F, another person's name on the banner. That's not politics. That's not thoughtful. That's not clever politics. That's not even that. You don't want to pass that to the next generation. That's not politics. That's just noise, and that's virulence. And you don't know what sits behind that kind of politics. Sometimes it's just the world is such a complex place now. It might just be money. People just wanting to sustain their own lifestyle and all that by riding on the ignorance of others, right? To raise money,
right?
To sustain their own lifestyle, to sustain what they are used to.
Keep
they
their own power, right?
In the fancy house. They want to have a small aircraft, a boat, and all that. And the only way to do that is to divide us. So you against, and in the same family, you have one person on this side, the other person on that side. You're making money from that side. I'll make money from that. We sustain our lifestyle with that. But that's not politics.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let me ask you, we got about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
With our theme of taking hate out of the conversation,
right?
Is there one thing that you could, and this is a hard question to ask, like on the spot, if there's one thing that I could ask you that would go a long way to taking hate out of the conversation, because you're a dad, you've got 2 daughters, and I'm assuming they look like you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're gonna have babies, and you're gonna be granddad or grandpapa or whatever the Nigerian, English, Canadian version of that is gonna be, which I think would be awesome. But when that happens, what is one thing that you could point to in now our 2 minutes of time left that you could say would help take hate out of the conversation for them?
I think would be if at that point that my children have learned and have demonstrated clearly that they've been taught not to see a fellow human being based on whatever their color, their sexual orientation, and their gender or wherever, and that they can take that into the workplace, into the relationships that they form. I don't care, as long as whatever that looks like is a human being and is thoughtful. And so I have those very hard conversations, and they're very difficult conversations. I don't care what orientation or whatever. You have, based on where you come from, expectations. But for me, we live in Canada, and this is the standard against which I think every human being should be. Total respect and consideration for another person based on the content of the character or the content of their heart. I don't see color. I don't. In my head, I don't. I don't see, ethnicity or whatever, even within different cultures. I don't see those. I just see the person. And what I'm looking for is how to teach that person to love and to be considerate and to show empathy So even when someone pushes back, I'm not seeing the negative side of that pushback. I'm asking, how can I be better? So if you can come to me that I've done something that you don't like, I'm going to be asking, so how can I be better? What did I do that you don't like? Okay, so how can I be better? And I'm consciously in my head checking, is there something I could do better and to become a better human being so that I'm not putting this person in a difficult position? Because there are also mental health implications to everything. How you make others feel, what to say about them, what to do to them. Sometimes you could be, destroying people totally, and you could just be an architect of a much more negative thing, right, in that person than you were intending to. So that for me will be the winning point.
Well, Afeez, thank you for adding to our conversation, and thank you for coming here, choosing Canada, but also for making this a better place.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Having me back.
Appreciate you being on with us today, and appreciate you guys tuning in, and look forward to our next podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me in the studio once again, and hope you enjoy the rest of the very cold day.
Yeah. All right. Have a good day.
Thanks.